So welcome to today's podcast. Thanks for joining me as always. When I'm talking to clients and certainly my tax professional friends and partners, it's often stated by clients, I'm paying way too much in taxes. And most people feel that in some shape or form. And realistically, there are legitimate cases where tax planning will provide some significant benefits, and there are opportunities that are likely missed. But I've also noticed as I've dug a little deeper and working with clients is that the taxes themselves, yes, they may be painful, but they're sometimes more of a symptom of a larger issues around design of how people are running their financial lives. And so taxes are the most visible, most painful, right? Because you got to stroke that check or a lot of money feels like it's going away. But it's sometimes a symptom of something larger where there's a lack of coordination and other things in our financial lives that are driving into these other areas that are much more impactful than they may see other than just taxes. So today, I really want to cover for folks who are listening, what maybe I'm seeing below the surface for others that are seeing the tax side of things, but if once they dive deeper and ask themselves harder questions, they unearth some other things that they're really, truly worried about or concerned with or create friction in their lives. And, given my background, a lot of the things I connect with the medical community from family and my experience in it. And so it's always easy to sort of relate to that because imagine you're a patient going to see a doctor and you have a fever and, yes, they can address the fever from a symptom perspective, but really good doctors obviously are trying to diagnose what's really happening. What's the root of all that? Is it an infection? Is it something happening that's creating inflammation that needs to be investigated and really going much deeper to unearth whether you have a deeper problem that needs to be addressed at the root. And taxes kind of work sometimes in the same way. You kind of have to backtrack it and understand like where it's being derived from. Because the tax bill itself is often the kind of fever, right? And you kind of have to see what's happening below the surface that may be causing it and what you can do to remedy it at the fever level, but more importantly at the root. So when we think about taxes and, now talking to more people about this, what are they really trying to solve when they say, hey, I've got a tax problem, right? And I witnessed this the other day and talking to folks, they're making more income and they just feel like can barely get by. And some of that's a root, a situation with inflation and what we're dealing with today. But it's also, it feels like a lot of money is just being siphoned away from their lives and there's potential inefficiencies in life, one being taxes. Whether you're a business owner or high income W-2, it just feels like the more money you make, it's just more of it goes away. And it's tough to feel wealthy and it feels like everyone else is wealthier. So, this may result in, more of a cash flow situation and wealth building problem than a tax situation. So people are trying to say, how do I get ahead? Well, one option is to keep more of my money from taxes. And there are some people who are doing well and they have some cash sitting around, but just, maybe sitting in a bank account and, earning whatever it's earning that's in their savings account or maybe brokerage accounts or retirement accounts. And, but they actually don't have a clear cut plan. They may have pieces together, but there's no really cohesive strategy behind it. And so there's no connection into what the money's supposed to serve for you for now and in the future, right? A lot of it's just parts and there's no cohesiveness to the plan itself. So there's sometimes people feel disconnected in terms of what they're doing. So it's really more of a planning issue more than anything. Is that everything you're doing from a financial standpoint, from building, protecting, and certainly mitigating and identifying and getting rid of inefficiencies, is that really supporting the life you're building or your current day life in the way that you'd want? And then a lot of other cases, especially for people who are getting more complex in their lives with families, businesses, thinking about potential retirement. I mean, the complexities are kind of mount. And so people sometimes are making big decisions around things and having maybe multiple types of advisors that never really talk to each other, whether it's buying real estate or selling a business or estate planning. There's a lot of things that taxes then eventually enter the game, and maybe sometimes too late in the game. And so that may be a result of it, but really what it kind of indicates is that maybe there's some additional coordination and planning that needs to happen beforehand, with the relevant experts to help people make better decisions. Because what I do believe in a lot of scenarios is that we certainly don't want the tax tail to wag the dog, right? We don't want to just do things abruptly to just mitigate taxes without it really being integrated into what you're doing broadly, right? And I think that requires a little bit more coordination and thought, as opposed to how can I reduce taxes this year? The most common thought around this is like a lot of people who are deferring their taxes in, say, their 401k or retirement plans. Not a bad thing to do, but the bigger piece of it is thinking about how am I going to eventually use those dollars and use them in the most tax efficient manner down the road, because that's really going to be the part of your income producer in your future. So how are we going to do that with the most tax efficient manner or structure? And how does it coordinate with the rest of your other assets that you may be consuming or passing to the next generation? So when we think about taxes as a whole, right, some of it's fairly straightforward, right? When you think about taxes, layer one is, hey, we do need to unfortunately do tax prep, whether you do that yourself or hire an expert to do it. And it's obviously a backwards exercise, trying to just kind of report things properly, sort of report it to the IRS and pay your taxes as you're on time. And so that's why you hire experts to help you do that, or if you do it yourself, right? So that's very much backwards compliance focus. Tax planning really is trying to look forward, right? Just like financial planning, broadly speaking, you're trying to project forward, set up your world in a way to be most tax efficient, now and in the future. And so it's really trying to get ahead of things. What can I do differently today that's going to create better tax outcomes in various scenarios? And then the third layer of this, sort of in my mind from a tax perspective, is, structuring, designing things differently in your life. And that could be, if you're a business owner, business structures and how you're getting compensated, right? That can make a difference because there's different types of income that are taxed differently. Obviously, investments are a huge component, like the types of investments, because laden within the tax code are incentives to invest in certain types of things. And then, cash flow management and use of debt, those are all layered into the sort of design of what you're doing personally and in your business or life. And there's actually tax implications all layered in there that need to be thought through and work together. And the last layer, which I do believe is probably does not get as much attention, but really it's the heart of why we do any of this. Why are we building wealth and working in our jobs or businesses and maybe sacrificing time for our families, is because we're trying to build and sustain a life today that serves us in the highest level for the things that matter, our family, causes, whatever. And then, building to a future day of maybe a different life, whether that's retirement or shifting gears to a new business you want to start on your own, or just having free time with your family. What are we building towards? And, what I've seen, talking to more and more people, there's not always a direct connection with their financial plan to what that life looks like. And that's what we're trying to do, right? All of us are trying to do that. Like, how do we build a life that is truly the life we truly want to live? And how do the resources and wealth support it, right? Not what we're told we're supposed to have, what number or whatever. It's really, what are those resources and how do they support how we get to show up on a daily basis and live our lives? It seems simple, but I think it's one that gets overlooked quite a bit because we get so enamored with what we're supposed to do from a financial plan and building our wealth. We follow what we hear. And so it's easy to kind of not step back. It's harder to step back from it and say, why are we doing any of these things? And is it really supporting us in our lives? or is it creating additional stress or worries in our lives? And these are things that maybe need to be looked at. And what does success really look like to you? And that then you can really maybe adjust how you're making decisions or coordinating your financial life to match it. Here's a quick, dirty sort of real life example. And I've seen some of these things where, even some families are making $500,000 a year. I got two different families, but, one pays a lot less taxes because they're getting ahead of things, or planning and structuring their financial lives in a cohesive manner and planning for it, right, from a tax perspective. But they're just more intentional. They've structured maybe their businesses uniquely. They're investing in things that are tax advantaged that they understand and know. But there's a broader coordination in what they're doing, from where they're saving to where they're investing, how they're structuring their business and lives. And they actually have different advisors that actually are collaborating, working together. Your tax guy, your financial guy, your estate planner. These are all sort of cohesive parts of the system. And it's not just about finding the next tax deduction known to man, but they're winning because their financial life is actually working together, right? And versus in some cases, a lot of people's lives are actually working opposite from each other and causing some friction. But it does take some intentionality to do so. And I often see this, especially when I'm dealing with my CPA friends. I have so much respect for them. The tax code and the compliance world has gotten so complicated that it's hard to keep on top of it all. It just constantly changes, and sometimes the guidance isn't super clear. And obviously they keep on adding to the code, but they don't want to take away from it. So I can't imagine, it's a really difficult job for them. And I respect all the work that tax professionals do. And they're the first ones to hear when things happen often, because people will come to them and they'll tell them, I'm selling my business or sold my home or got a major inheritance, whatever the situation is. And they are trusted advisors. However, they may not have the time or ability to help in all those different areas to help you get ahead of it. But they're a great resource because a lot of people want to go to them because they trust them. But unfortunately, a lot of them are well beyond taxes, right? And so we got to factor in and work collaboratively to help them, the clients, really sort of make the best decisions outside of just a tax question. So if you're listening to this today, this may be you. It might be a tax situation for you, right? And that's completely understandable. When that pain happens, and certainly have for me personally, it does not feel good, and nobody wants to pay more than they're legally required to. But it's maybe the questions may need to shift. Is the tax bill really the bigger problem, right? It might be the more immediate problem, but maybe a different question is it signaling a bigger problem around how my financial life is designed, organized and coordinated. And maybe that's a different question you can ask yourself to figure out if that's an area that you need attention for. And then the tax strategy can complement it, right? Sometimes the best tax strategy really isn't just another deduction. It's a better design on how you're utilizing your wealth, broadly speaking. So this was just a kind of broad stroke to kind of share some things that I've seen and what I've heard and come across with talking to CPAs and clients. And we're going to do more of these episodes to kind of get a little bit deeper behind the surface, because the reality is, so much attention is focused on a specific product or a specific strategy or investment per se. Yes, those are all important components of everything. But underneath of all is realizing how those things are all connected to a broader plan and how they help serve the life you're trying to build and lead. And it starts not with a specific strategy, but it starts with asking better questions, deeper questions. And that's what we're going to try to unearth through this series to kind of help you sort of maybe explore for yourself and see what else you might want to sort of examine outside of just how do I reduce my taxes. So thanks for joining me today. Hopefully this was helpful. We'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for joining me on this episode today. I really am grateful for you as listeners to the Perennial Pride Podcast. I hope you're getting some tremendous value out of it and hopefully pushing you along your journey to financial freedom. I put this podcast together really to help you get more educated around your finances so that you feel empowered to live the life that you really want. And if you like the content that you heard today or watched, then I would encourage you to go to my website, perennialpride.com. There's tons of other content there. And you can access my book, Wealth Beyond the Numbers. You can buy it there on my website. It's a aggregation of a lot of great tips and tools I've learned to not only build my wealth in my accounts, but build wealth in my life and abundance and joy, and something that has a lot of my experiences in the journey that I've been on personally. Hopefully that can be also of value to you as you sort of move forward. So thanks again for being a Perennial Pride listener, and we'll see you on the next episode.